Hello, all you freedom-loving people. President Trump announced massive cuts to drug prices, and he may be going to Turkey for the talks between Russia and Ukraine. The talks with China so far have also been surprisingly productive. Okay, let's get into it. Yesterday, President Trump posted on Truth Social, "I'll be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. Prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 30 to 80%. Then at a press conference at the White House this morning during the signing of the executive order, President Trump explained how the U.S. will no longer be subsidizing the health care of foreign countries.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for, and will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. So what's been happening is we've been subsidizing other countries throughout the world, not just in Europe, throughout the world. European Union was the most difficult, from what I understand.
President Trump also explained how the U.S. has the highest drug prices in the world.
So today, Americans spend 70% more for prescription drugs than we spent in the year 2000. Think of that. Our country has the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by sometimes a factor of 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It's not like they're slightly higher. They're 6, 7, 8 times. There are even cases of 10 times higher. So that you go 10 times more expensive for the same drug, that's big numbers. Even though the United States is home to only 4% of the world's population, pharmaceutical companies make more than 2/3 of their profits in America. So think of that. With 4% of the population, the pharmaceutical companies make most of their money, most of their profits from America. That's not a good thing.
This executive order reveals shocking details on Europe's so-called free health care. It turns out that it's never been free. Americans have been footing the bill for years.
This means American patients were effectively subsidizing socialist health care systems in Germany, in all parts of the European Union. They were the toughest of all. They were nasty.
President Trump also shared a funny anecdote that helped explain the differences in prices between the U.S. and Europe.
President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300.
Dr. McCary of the FDA was also present for the press conference. He thanked President Trump for taking such decisive action.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the many doctors I've talked to about this very issue, thank you for taking the bull by the horns. Presidents on both sides of the aisle have talked about this and floated it and said they've wanted to do it, so you've had the courage to do it. Thank you. I've been a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins for 22 years, and I have seen patients suffer. We didn't take an oath to heal patients and then watch their life get ruined financially with their home, mortgage, retirement, going down the drain with GoFundMe campaigns, raising money from church communities and synagogues and friends they haven't seen in 20 years to try to raise money. For what? For a system where Americans have been getting ripped off by 10, 12, 15 times higher prices than we see in other countries? The fundamental problem in healthcare is that we've had non-competitive markets. And we can do little things around the edges, or we can transform those markets to competitive markets. And that's what this executive order does today.
And Dr. Mehmet Oz, the administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also praised the move by President Trump.
This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. And it's only happening because we have a president with the fortitude, the guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur as soon as folks hear about the executive order. So on behalf of the child in Philadelphia who's got an autoimmune disease with a $1,000 a month drug, or the older woman in Los Angeles who's on a blood thinner who can't afford her copay, I want to thank President Trump. God bless you for having the guts to take on this industry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Today, Hamas released Adan Alexander without terms and conditions. He was known as the last American hostage in Gaza. Alexander is an Israeli-American soldier who was captured from his base during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, which ignited the Gaza war. He is a native of New Jersey, where his parents and siblings still live. In 2022, he moved to Israel after high school and enlisted in the Israeli Defense Forces. There are still 59 hostages inside Gaza, with up to 24 who are believed to still be alive. The release of Alexander was in the hope of working toward a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and for resuming aid delivery to the territory that Hamas controls. President Trump said in a social media post on yesterday, "This was a step taken in good faith toward the United States and the efforts of the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, to put an end to this very brutal war and return all living hostages and remains to their loved ones. Hopefully, this is the first of those final steps necessary to end this brutal conflict. I look very much forward to that day of celebration." The hostage release came while President Trump left Washington for a trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. The India-Pakistan conflict has attracted global attention in recent days, but President Trump said on Saturday that the issue was resolved through U.S. mediation. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, after a long night of talks mediated by the United States, "I'm pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire." Today, during his press conference at the White House, President Trump explained what the main factors are in the pause of hostilities. He said that the promise of trade with the U.S. is the main factor in the pause.
Before we begin, let me say a few words about the historic events that took place over the last few days. On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases, and having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India. We're negotiating with India right now. We're going to be soon negotiating with Pakistan.
The sudden announcement of the ceasefire came as a surprise to many just a few hours before Indian and Pakistani forces were attacking each other's bases. According to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he and Vice President Vance were in contact with Indian and Pakistani leaders and militaries in an effort to broker a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. After President Trump's announcement, both India and Pakistan confirmed the ceasefire. Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar said that lines of communication between the governments and the militaries of India and Pakistan have been opened. Dar declared, Pakistan has always strived for peace and security in the region without compromising on its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Indian Foreign Minister Vikram Misri said that the top military officials in India and Pakistan have agreed that both sides would stop all fighting and military action on land, air, and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time. And the chiefs of the military operations of the two countries met again today, but only a few hours after the ceasefire went into effect, the two sides accused each other of violating it. A number of explosions were heard in two major cities in the Indian-controlled Kashmir region. Power cuts followed in both cities, but no casualties were reported. Vikram Misri said that it was Pakistan who violated the ceasefire. He added that the Indian army was retaliating against their border incursion. But in Islamabad, Pakistan's foreign ministry accused Indian troops of violating the ceasefire agreement in some areas without giving details. Although India and Pakistan each rule a part of Kashmir, both countries claim full sovereignty over the area. The two countries have previously fought over the disputed area. This weekend, the U.S. and Europe put pressure on Ukraine and Russia to meet face-to-face. Ukraine ignored Putin's three-day Victory Day ceasefire offer, but Zelensky put forward a proposal to extend the ceasefire for 30 days from Monday, saying that it's a condition of any peace talks. Western allies issued an ultimatum to Russia to accept the complete and unconditional 30-day ceasefire offer, or Moscow would face new massive sanctions from the West. The Kremlin said that it would consider the European ceasefire offer. However, Russia warned that pressuring Moscow would be pointless. Russian President Putin took a day to evaluate their demand/proposal, and he came back with his own plan. On Sunday, he proposed direct talks with Ukraine on May 15th in Turkey. He said that the talks should be aimed at bringing a durable peace. Turkey President Erdogan was quick to endorse the idea, and he offered to host the talks in Istanbul. And then President Trump came out with a post that appears to welcome the move. He wrote, "Ukraine should agree to this immediately. At least they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible, and if it's not, European leaders and the U.S. will know where everything stands and can proceed accordingly." I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin, who's too busy celebrating the victory of World War II, which could not have been won, not even close, without the United States of America have the meeting now. Zelensky responded later that he is ready for talks with Putin in Istanbul, Turkey on May 15th. Zelensky stated, "We await a full and lasting ceasefire starting from tomorrow to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy. There's no point in prolonging the killings, and I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey on Thursday. Personally, I hope that this time the Russians will not look for excuses." And today, before leaving for the Middle East, President Trump also said that he would consider flying to Turkey for the proposed meeting between Zelensky and Putin on Thursday. President Trump said, "I was thinking about flying over. I'm not sure where I'll be on Thursday. I have so many meetings, but there's a possibility, I suppose, if I think something productive could happen." The U.S. and CCP trade teams held 2 days of trade talks this weekend in Geneva, Switzerland. This was the first official contact between the two sides since President Trump returned to the White House, so the U.S. side didn't have high expectations beforehand. But surprisingly, the talks turned out quite well. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer announced on Sunday that substantial progress had been made in 2 days of high-level negotiations.
And I think that led to a great deal of the productivity we've seen. We will be giving details tomorrow, but I can tell you that the talks were productive. We had the Vice Premier, 2 Vice Ministers who were integrally involved, Ambassador Jamieson and myself, and I spoke to President Trump, as did Ambassador Jamieson last night, and he is fully informed of what is going on. So there will be a complete briefing tomorrow morning.
When President Trump heard the details, he was excited and he praised the very good discussions, and he deemed them a total reset, negotiated in a friendly but constructive manner. He said in a True Social post, "We want to see, for the good of both China and the U.S., an opening up of China to American business." President Trump's U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said that the fact that the two sides were able to reach a consensus so quickly indicated that their differences were not as great as expected.
I want to echo the Secretary's remarks with respect to the Swiss government. They've been so welcoming, and they've hosted this, and everything has gone off flawlessly, and we appreciate that. And again, to the Chinese negotiators, Vice Premier Liu He, Vice Minister Li Qiangong, and Vice Minister Liao Min, worked very diligently, and these are very tough negotiators. A couple of them I know from before and have had past interactions with them. And this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought.
But is there really not much difference between the systems inside China and the United States? That doesn't seem to match up with what we know. Washington wants to shrink the trade deficit with China, and it wants to convince Beijing to abandon its current mercantilist economic model and to increase its consumption contribution to global purchases. This has a bearing on reforms that are very sensitive for the Beijing authorities. Beijing considers this series of U.S. actions to be external interference in China's internal affairs. So mistrust remains on both sides, and neither side is willing to totally give in. However, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said on Sunday that Beijing can't wait to reach a deal.
I could say that what's going to happen in all likelihood is that relationships are going to be rebooted. It looks like the Chinese are very, very eager to play ball and to renormalize things. And so, what exactly goes on and off the table is in the negotiation right now, so I have to be careful giving specifics. But the president has said that we're essentially starting from scratch with the Chinese, and they seem to think that they really want to rebuild a relationship that's great for both of us.
Regarding the venue for the talks, many people think that Switzerland is a neutral country, so that is why they chose to hold the talks in Switzerland. But Mr. Wang Kuo-chen, a full-time assistant researcher at the First Research Institute of Taiwan's Graduate School of Economics, pointed out that this is a misunderstanding. The U.S. and Switzerland are having trade talks in 2 days, and that is why the meeting was held in Switzerland. China's entry was clearly a surprise, so it seems that the Beijing authorities are the ones who are eager to negotiate with the United States. If it were the U.S. side that was eager to talk, then the U.S. and China should be holding talks in France. This is because there will be a China-France finance summit this weekend in France. During the secret high-level consultations that were held in Switzerland this time, the CCP was forced to bow down due to internal and external challenges. The CCP has never expected much from the talks, and its main goal is to find out Washington's demands and red lines regarding topics other than tariffs, like fentanyl and the COVID-19 cover-up. Since President Trump imposed steep tariffs on China last month, Beijing has responded on state and social media with images of Mao Zedong, with commentary such as, "China won't kneel down because we know standing up for ourselves keeps the possibility of cooperation alive, while compromise snuffs it out." But behind closed doors, CCP officials have grown increasingly alarmed about the impact of the tariffs on the economy and the risk of isolation as China's trading partners have started negotiating deals with Washington. The CCP government's main motive for the climb down includes internal signals that Chinese companies were struggling to avoid bankruptcy. Some areas that are feeling the immediate impact are furniture, toy makers, and textiles. In addition, Beijing is worried that it will be left without a place at the negotiating table while its major trading partners, such as Vietnam, India, and Japan, begin talks with Washington. The CCP's Commerce Ministry sent a warning to the countries that are negotiating with the U.S. last week that appeasement cannot bring peace, compromise cannot be respected, and adhering to principled positions and upholding fairness and justice is the right way to safeguard one's own interests. On the other hand, after President Trump's tariff salvo last month, CCP Commerce Minister Wang Wentao quietly reached out to his U.S. counterpart, Howard Lutnick, but he was rebuffed as not senior enough. President Trump has been pushing for direct talks with CCP Chairman Xi Jinping, but China has rejected that idea. This is because it's not in line with his traditional practice of working out the details of an agreement before it's signed by the two leaders. As we've explained before, because of President Trump's public confrontation with Zelensky at the White House in February, the Chinese Communist Party is concerned that any unplanned hostile interaction between the U.S. and Chinese leaders would represent an unacceptable loss of face for Xi Jinping. So the CCP decided to put forward its vice premier and Xi Jinping confidant, He Lefeng, whose direct predecessor struck the Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. in 2019. The move satisfied Washington's demands for substantive talks with a senior official with direct access to Xi Jinping.
But will it also have to do with other things like some of the currency manipulation or the spying and the surveillance, of course, fentanyl, COVID cover-up, any of the other non-tariff barriers?
I think the Chinese have brought their A-team to these negotiations. They've got the competence to cover all the topic areas that you've discussed in the room. And we've got, Scott Bessent and Jameson, two of the best of the business. And so, we'll see what happens. But I think that everybody is interested in putting enough on the table so that we make a lot of progress this weekend.
And this morning, the contents of the preliminary agreement between the two sides were revealed. The two countries agreed on a 90-day pause on measures, and they agreed that they will move their tariffs down. Bessent said both countries represented their national interests very well. We both have an interest in balanced trade. The U.S. will continue moving toward that. Jameson Greer said that the U.S.'s reciprocal tariff rate will go down to 30%, so it goes down 115%. And the Chinese, on their side, also go down 115% to 10%. And they remove the countermeasures that they have in place. And the Chinese and the United States agreed to work constructively together on fentanyl. But the 20% tariff imposed by the United States on fentanyl imports from China will remain in effect for now. Prior to the talks, President Trump had said that setting tariffs on China at 80% would be reasonable. Therefore, the current rate of tariff reduction, though temporary, has indeed exceeded everyone's expectations. Experts interpreted that while President Trump expressed his desires to lower the tariffs, the White House later clarified that the president would lower the tariffs only if the Chinese side made concessions. U.S. economist David Huang said that this is a typical Trump-style negotiation technique, which is to first release the possibility of concessions to attract Beijing to take a position and then to make it clear that this is something that needs to be exchanged on terms. Wong said if Beijing backtracks and fails to honor the agreement, the U.S. can immediately resume imposing substantial tariffs and even more. This is tantamount to the U.S. entering a game-playing era of tariffs that can be turned on and off. There will be a series of negotiations between the two sides. Bessent said in a follow-up interview with CNBC, "We have a process now. We have a meeting mechanism. We loosely christened it the Geneva mechanism." Markets reacted positively to the deal. Futures on the S&P 500 and NASDAQ jumped to 2.8% and 3.5%, while in Europe, the Stoxx 600 rose 0.7%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index ended the day with 3% gains, and the U.S. dollar strengthened by 1.6%. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave us a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after you subscribe. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.